Leave the layer Cordia August Software Road. Welcome to be my guest with me, Mary Honan on LíR Media TV, supporting the Samaritans, Limerick and Tipperary, Clare's Wish Foundation in Limerick, and Deel Animal Rescue in West Limerick. And my fabulous guest today, there's so many people waiting to actually hear this interview, I think. And it's Rose Fearon all the way from Toronto in Canada. Hi, Rose.
Hi, how are you?
Sure, you know, I'm grand. The weather is beautiful here, but it starts raining every now and again.
We're getting more or less the same thing here. Super hot and then pouring rain for a week. So yeah, it's really odd. But you know, what isn't odd these last couple of years? So
yeah. But Rose, you're involved very heavily, very heavily involved in the Irish dancing scene worldwide, it has to be said, and you would be amongst, I suppose, the teachers, the elite teachers, if you like. We're all teachers, but you would have had many world championships wins in your time, and you're still teaching and still very still up there insofar as we can even compete at the moment. I don't know what's the situation, Rose, in Toronto. Are you back?
Yeah, we literally just got permission to go back into a dancing hall 2 weeks ago. So our kids have not been in a studio since November.
Isn't this scandalous?
So yeah, the first shutdown was bad. The first shutdown was March to September for us. We did go back in small numbers, like groups of 4 or 5 in September, and got shut down again in November. And we've been shut down ever since. So the second lockdown has been devastating. It was actually even harder than the first lockdown. The first lockdown, we actually had at least big box stores open, the Costco's, and second lockdown, nothing. Everything was shut down. So we're just coming out of it now. But our numbers are doing good. So maybe they did the right thing. I don't know. I know it's hard to say.
We're in much the situation, same situation, except we're still not allowed let it in the north of Ireland, north of the border. I was just looking there a few minutes ago now. Peter Boylan sent an email about their upcoming fesh, Gavin and that. And I'm thinking we have no feshna down here in the south. And it's just, there's people going across the border for a drink or across the border for their groceries.
Yeah, it's crazy.
Come across the border to the south, but you can't open. And now they have brought it to a situation where they're trying to really enforce anyone who isn't vaccinated. You have to have this pass to go in and have a drink. And I think that's very dangerous.
It's very controversial here too. They're trying to figure out what to do with it, but it's a very controversial
incredibly
situation. Having said that, when I was a child, I do remember very distinctly being, 3 or 4 the very first time I went to Ireland. And we all had to be vaccinated to go to Ireland. Back in the 60s. Now, granted, I'm a 60s child, but back in the 60s, we had to have our vaccinations to travel.
Oh, I understand.
It was a little passport, and I've got a big scar here from my vaccine. Yeah, you know the one, the big. Yeah, so I don't know. They did it before with polio and other things, but this is a little more controversial. But I'm sure it'll work its way out.
It's more controversial because it was rushed through so quickly, and people aren't sure. Whereas with the MMR and the polio, I got the polio injection in the UK before the vaccine came out here in Ireland, and a cousin and a friend of mine both contacted polio here in Ireland, but I had been vaccinated against it in the UK. So that was fortunate, but it is controversial that you have to show a vaccine pass to actually go in for a drink. Yeah. But Rose, how did you get involved in Irish dancing from day one? Was it always expected in your family?
Now you make me really pick my brain because it was so long ago. I come from an Irish dancing family. I'm not sure if you know that. My parents are immigrants. They were at a display or a dance actually, and saw a group of kids, doing a display of Irish dancing, and that's how we started. So they found the closest school that to us, which was Noreen Quinn, and she was from Derry. And I started, and Bridget Grant started dancing. Bridget danced here for a few years before she opened her own school. So we were actually in the same dancing school when I first started. Then she had her son, Brian, and she eventually retired from competing and opened her own school. So yeah, it goes way back to there. So Paula Woodgate, who is also an aunt, for people that don't probably understand the association, Bridget Grant, Mike Woodgate, and my mom are all brother and sister. Yeah. So yeah, dancing has just been a huge part of our careers.
Do you think that, and I know I've heard it said quite a lot, that when people emigrate from Ireland to the United States, and no, my mother was an emigrant to the UK, my dad was English, had she had a community around her in Wembley of Irish people, she didn't dance, but she was a singer, I think she would have lived there longer than she did. She just didn't have that Irish community around her. And she'd come from a small little area in Limerick where everyone knew everyone. You didn't even have a key for your door. If you were short milk or sugar, you went in to someone else's house and took some of theirs and repaid them. That was the way it was in the little area. Do you think that that's what helped your parents to settle, and two, that almost made you more culturally aware than we were even in this country? Because it's when something's on your doorstep, Rose, you tend to take it for granted quite a lot.
I completely agree with that statement. My mom and dad, my father's from the north, he's from Newry. My mom is from Kilkenny. They're two very different situations. My mom's older brother and sister emigrated first, started working, and brought out the next two and the next two and the next two. So there's only one of my mom's siblings, Johnny, that emigrated to the UK. So they were all out here. So there was a slightly different situation. And then my mom's mother came out for her wedding. My mom met my father here at a dance.
Well, same as mom.
Yeah, as all the Irish did. They would go to the local Irish dance. Very different situation. My father and one of his brothers, comes from a family of 8, were the only ones to emigrate. So it was a very different situation. All my cousins and whatnot on my father's side are all in Ireland. They never emigrated. So it was two very different situations. But I totally agree. The Irish, when they emigrate, it was a way of, finding an Irish community. I will say that when I first started teaching dancing, Kathy Irvine, Joanne Cunningham, that whole group, to this day, consider all those people their family. Yeah. They were all from immigrant families. Irish dancing is very different in Canada, I think, or at least it was back when I started, than it is in the States. Irish dancing was very much a first generation thing that was done.
Yeah.
Like it didn't really go down 10th and 11th and 12th generation. It was a first generation. And it was a way for immigrants to have a family here as well, because most of them came out and their families did not. So they were here on their own. So, I mean, that's really how the kind of people I had in the very first school I had. And there's, to this day, they are still family. So it's really kind of a remarkable thing.
It's like any, we say, we tend to say that we're Irish, and other people are saying Italians, and then you've got the Jewish community. And you look at all these kind of, I suppose, indigenous communities, and you say that what they have in common is that when they go abroad or they go to another country, they still stay within their own. Yes, they try to integrate and they meet people, and there's no one greater than the Irish, I suppose, at mixing. But they still know that they have the comfort of people who share similarities, who share cultural identities or cultural quirkisms, if you like. Or
yeah, I think the Irish story here in Toronto, and again, it's not the same all across Canada. We had very much more northern immigration at the beginning than southern. Most southern immigrants went to the States. And I think probably, the biggest reason was Canada was part of the UK. We didn't get our independence till 1967. So it was a very easy transition to make, paperwork wise. So we had very much more Northerners. I found the Irish here, immigrants anyway, there were two schools. They either kind of stuck with an Irish community or went completely away from it. We're probably one of the only major cities in the world that don't have an Irish center.
Do you not?
No.
Rose, how did that happen?
No, well, they tried to start one years ago, but as I say, Irish immigrants would come to the city, move out to the suburbs, and then disappear from. So it's not exactly the same story as other major cities that people would think. Like we're not at all like Boston or New York or any of the American major Irish centers, San Francisco. Like we're not at all like that. Toronto was very Presbyterian when we came. We only got a St. Patrick's Day parade. I believe it was in the late 80s, like things like that. So Irish dancing was very hard to get started and get going here. To this day, it's very small here. Very, very, very small community of dancers. I think the illusion that we had a rather large school was just that, an illusion.
I would have thought your school was enormous.
Well, I guess who you're comparing to, at the peak of my school here in Toronto, we've never had more than 75. That would be the peak. So it's normally around the 50. Really? San Francisco would be around the same, 30 to 50. And
here in Ireland,
in California now, when I first started teaching down there, was huge. There was probably at least 100, and then they gradually tapered off. I'm not the kind of teacher, I guess, for everybody. I have absolutely no business sense, zero.
Oh, I haven't.
When I started teaching here, and really right up to I started teaching in California, I also had a full-time job. So Irish dancing was just my passion, and that's the way I treated it. So from a business perspective, I was never able to actually launch that type of a school. So
I thought I was one like that. I always envied people who actually made a business out of it, because I tried so many times, but children would come in, or their parents would say, "Look, Mary, I hate saying this to you, but I've just, my husband lost his job. Can we pay you after the summer?" And I'm like, "Sure." And I would have to pay for the hall, because I might have only about 4 or 5. So I'd have to pay for the hall. But I knew I'd get it back eventually. But went well.
Same here. Same here, basically. So it's always been like that. And then when I started teaching in California, it was 2000. Well, it's a long history of different. Should I go back to the beginning or no? Okay. So I started my own school in 1977. I was very young. I was 17. I was actually even too young to do my TCRG. And believe it or not, they did allow me to do my TCRG a year early. I did my TCRG at 19 instead of 20.
Wow.
Long history to that too. There was a big commotion here when I first started teaching, and had gotten a conditional registration. And to stop that, they allowed me to do my TCRG early. So I did do it when I was 19.
Oh, What was the
So that was,
experience like for you of your TC?
pardon me?
Did you have a good experience doing your TC?
No. I had
I had a
a
great
couple,
experience for my TC.
no, it was horrific. The most horrific thing I ever did. I only had a, month's notice that I was going to be allowed to do it. Memorized, literally did not learn them, memorized the books for the exam.
Yeah.
We did not do traditional sets or anything at that time in Canada. I had nowhere to learn them. My mother taught me a single jig because I didn't even know what a single jig was. Taught me a single jig from her Kokani days. Honestly, I'll never forget it. Pop goes the weasel. That's what she taught me it too.
It's
Because
like
we didn't do them here. At that time when I competed in this country, we didn't even do a triple jig or a hornpipe. We just did a soft shoe and a set. So yeah, major changes I've watched this country go through.
that is a gigantic leap. That's extraordinary leap, Rose.
I learned the traditional sets at the exam.
And
We were downtown Toronto and I didn't know them and I had to learn them there. So I learned one and ran in and they let me dance it and I came back out and had to learn another one and run back in because we had to do two. Yeah, it was the most horrific experience I've ever had. But I was young and I was just out of school and my brain actually worked. So I was able to memorize things really quickly. I mean, I was only, 19, just finished high school. And so thank God. Would I be able to do that today? Not in a million, but So.
I think, yeah, I did mine when I was, my TC when I was 22. Same year as I think Michael Dillon. The two of us did it the same year in Dublin, and it was great. I mean, I had Tommaso Farrelly, who was just an absolute gentleman, and Mary Duffy, and I can't remember the third lady. I remember her from the north, but they were. I mean, he did ask me questions in between when I was teaching cross reel. He asked me about a high call gap, and I just said to him, "Do you mind if I finish this first, and then I'll answer you?" And then when I had finished it, and I asked him now, and he said, "No, it's okay." And I always wondered, was it just testing me to see was I to panic?
Well, as you know yourself, the exam was a little bit different. I mean, it's evolved. Not the actual exam, but the actual way they approach the examiners approach the exam. So, I mean, it was a little different because I very distinctly remember turning my back and doing this, and them saying to me, "What are you doing?" Because as I said, I had memorized the books. And I was actually going through all the pages of the books to find the dance that they had asked me for, because I actually didn't, I may as well say it, I didn't actually know the dances other than the ones that we had danced as, in competition when I was with the Butler Academy. Thank God, because I got such a great base for figure dancing and for all kinds of other things that I'm really grateful for. My own dancing teacher retired very early on. I was probably about 12, I would say. Bridget Grant opened up her school. Paula Woodgate had just opened up her school. She had been dancing with the Butler Academy, and I went to the Butler Academy. So at one point in my history, we had 3 competing dancing schools in the one family. Though, if you can imagine those days.
But I'm going to ask you something that I haven't actually asked before, but it's coming off of that, the teams sort of situation and the trad sets. I personally think it's very important to start children at the basics and to have really, really good basics and therefore very good trad sets.
I agree.
And for trad sets to be danced as trad sets, not contemporary sets, masquerade, contemporary.
Yeah, embellished. Yeah, I totally agree.
Embellishments and that in it. How important do you think it is for dancers to actually, one, learn the traditional sets, even if they were never going to go on and do their DCRGs or their ADCRGs. And two, to learn teams, because I was a solo dancer. I think I danced in 2 teams ever. One was the Limerick Lace Workers with Nolan's for the world, and the second was a cross reel with Nolan's. And I don't remember. I was worried sick about the books. And when you said about this, we were inside. We were doing our exam in Dublin, and there was a big glass wall in front of us, and I could see Maya Walsh, who wasn't. He was over at that side. Michael Dillon was behind me, and all of us were doing handstand.
Trying to figure it out. I know.
Everyone doing books. I had the books learned off word for word, like
But that's why I said I just memorized them. I mean, you know, there was a month. I didn't know what else to do. To answer your question, I firmly believe that after you learn how to dance a soft shoe, that a traditional set, all of them, should be the next thing taught. Before a jig, before a hornpipe, everything you need to know about Irish dancing is in those traditional sets.
Oh, absolutely.
Every move that is considered, I don't know what word to use, a trick or whatever it is, its base is out of the traditional sets.
And sometimes
so you can dance a traditional set and do it really well. Any creative change to it, which is really all the tricks are. You learn cross keys, you learn rocks, you learn a little twist, you learn rhythm, you even learn offbeat rhythm. You know, as funny as that may sound, syncopated rhythm. I mean, the Molyneux sets are brilliant for that. I mean, I wish we had known about them when we were children, but syncopated rhythm actually is the Molyneux sets. Everything you need to know about it. I was never as excited for an All-Ireland as the year they introduced the traditional sets.
Yeah,
it was absolutely brilliant. It really made you sit and look at dancers very differently. The amount of kids that couldn't do a traditional set was actually surprising.
Yeah.
People's need to embellish them, I never understood. But I firmly believe it should have remained. And I know they tried to keep it, and I know it was a time issue too, the amount of time it took. I think it was more that than anything else, and that's unfortunate to me. But that first year that they introduced it, and it was around all by itself, it wasn't a throw-in thing or a down the line thing. I thought it was absolutely brilliant. I mean, I was really, really, really excited. I love a traditional set.
Oh, I love my favorite traditional set, I would have to say, is the Garden of Daisies. I love the Garden of Daisies. I loved any set with a rock and cross key in it.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love the Garden of Daisies. I love the tune. I love the Blackbird as well.
Mm-hmm.
But
that was May Butler's favorite, the Blackbird.
Yeah. It's just they're all beautiful in their own. The Job of Journey work the same. You know, they all have their own individual appealings, if you like.
Well, I think as a teaching tool, they all teach you one skill or 2 skills. And I think if you learn them correctly and you learn them building on top of each other, you learn all the skills you need. You know, i.e. St. Patrick's Day to me teaches a child the rhythm and timing and the purpose of a tip and how to do a tip correctly. It's a real important part of a treble. It's a real important part of rhythm. So it teaches you that. It teaches you the rocks. It teaches you to do a single treble. You know, you had the hornpipe ones that taught you hornpipe rhythm, and then to do a fast treble and a slow treble. Everything you need to know is in those traditional sets. I mean, I can't stress it enough. There's nothing that I could create that didn't start with something out of one of the traditional sets.
And I think
I can add to it.
I think that schools that don't teach the traditional sets, you can see some children and you know they're fabulous dancers, but you see them doing a hornpipe and it looks like a jig that's masquerading as a hornpipe. Everything the same with a slip jig that looks more like a reel. There's all these flicks and spins and twists and turns. And
yeah, I will say that is still my pet peeve. I've been on the commission for, I've got to be on the commission now going on 10 years, maybe longer. Probably every year, or at least every second year, I submit a motion to slow down the slip jigs. And every year I get shot down. I don't mean drastically slow, even just slow it down to, 110 being the max. With the festival dancing being so popular lately, I might have one more shot at it to slow it down a bit. I just think they're for two very different rhythms, two very different flows. When I ask, yourself, there was a time where there was no speeds. When we danced, there was no speeds. You danced to what you got. Yeah. But even, soft and hard shoe, that was the sets. But soft and hard shoe, you just danced to whatever you got. In this country, anyway, we danced very slow. Not that much faster than the festival dancers dance. For slip jig in this country, when I danced, they were very, very, very slow. When the speeds came out, I asked the question, why are the reel and slip jig the same speed? And I basically got kind of an answer of they're both soft shoes.
But one is 240.
I didn't understand that, because a jig and a hornpipe are both hard shoes, and they're two different speeds because they're two different rhythms, two completely different rhythms. So I find it very difficult to work within the bounds of using a soft shoe rhythm to a slip jig. I've never been able to quite cope with that. So sometimes we do get knocked for maybe being a little too walky is the word. It's very, to me, it's very difficult to choreograph a beautiful slip jig and have it in real time, because that's really what we're doing.
I think for me, it is when you see a child coming out doing what is clearly a slip jig. It's elegant, it's simplistic, it's pared back. There's lots of movement, lots of elegance, nothing forced, right up the tips of the toes. And it's completely different from a reel, which is more attacking. But you see a child coming out and they're a beautiful dancer, but they attack the slip jig like they'd attack a reel. And you're saying, you're longing to see a child just come out and do a slip jig the way, or a hornpipe, which is so completely different, as you know yourself.
To a jig. Yeah. Unfortunately, I think it always comes down to the same thing. We're in a competitive sport, art. I am very art. Yeah, I'm very much more about the art part than the sport part. But we are, and if children are not going to get credit for dancing a slip jig to a slip jig, we as teachers are forced to change, if that makes any sense. I've been up and down through it throughout the years. I've always tried to maintain some sort of slip jig, at least slip jig move or rhythm. A slip jig has a really nice 1, 2, 3, whereas a reel is boom, 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 boom. I always try to stick it in there somewhere, but I was forced to actually have to have them move faster and more things in the air, which I don't really think a slip jig is. And I had to compromise with it, because for the children's sake. I mean, at the end of the day, I'm teaching children. We're in a obviously, as you stated at the beginning, we are a highly competitive school. It wouldn't be proper for me to give them something I liked versus something they needed to compete with. And that's where the dilemma, and I think a lot of teachers have that dilemma. I think there's a lot of teachers that would like to do this, but they're doing this because that is what adjudication is giving credit for. The idea that dancing has got so much more athletic, I think it's the same issue. The kids that are strong and athletic, are getting more credit than the kids that are more artistic. So you've got that balance that we don't have. Myself as an adjudicator, I'm sure you face it yourself. you know, you have this beautiful artistic, you've got a strong, you know, what do you do? They're very hard to compare. Right. So, and if you're very artistic, you're going to be lacking a little bit of that power because you can't have both, you know, and vice versa. If you're very, very strong, you're going to be lacking. So where do you draw the line? And it always comes down to, you know, who is winning. Yeah. I mean, that's the trend that you're following. So unfortunately, you don't have that freedom, I don't think, as a teacher of a competitive school.
Do you think it's time that maybe a consensus was reached, or that maybe the question was asked of teachers and adjudicators what way they would like to see styles go, what way they would like to do? Would they like to see, as you say, the slower slip jig, or would they like to keep the status quo?
Yeah.
And that way.
Well, that's why I bring it up as a motion. I mean, that would be a start. To ask it as a questionnaire, I mean, you're never going to get, you know, a consensus. And if the consensus goes the opposite way to what I feel, I probably would still do what I do anyway. So it has been often said that we should have some kind of guidelines for judging, you know, i.e. you have to have, but in the way Irish dancing competitions have gone, because of the size of them, I honestly don't think it's possible. It physically is not possible. In a sport, you know, they compare it to gymnastics or ice skating where they're getting marks. They're all competing one at a time.
They are.
So as an adjudicator, you can sit and watch and pick out, you know, whatever standards that they're supposed to meet. You cannot do that when we are judging. Children are dancing 3 at a time. As it is, you can't watch 3. So it's a matter of eliminating kids for a role. There's no way you could have a standard. No. I mean, a child could perform the rock that they're supposed to perform way over on the right-hand side of the stage, and I could be watching the child on the left and miss it. I mean, how would you see it? So, just the way we are competing, it wouldn't be possible.
Do you think that there's
to be able to do that, you'd have to dance 1 at a time. And I don't think that wouldn't be possible with the numbers, you know, that we have. So it is a dilemma. I don't think it's that commission has ever not wanted to look at the adjudication system. But I honestly don't think you could implement something like that, which a lot of people are asking for, and have kids competing 3 at a time.
Do you think
now, as much as people don't like the 3 at a time, the 3 at a time has changed how we as teachers, choreographers, look at Irish dancing. You know, I consider the 3 at a time an elimination. Like in ice skating, they used to have basics. People would be eliminated. They go to the next round. I consider, you know, the dancing 3 at a time elimination, because a judge, in all honesty, cannot watch a real jig, treble jig, hornpipe, slip jig. It's only a minute long. You know, that's it. They're physically on a stage for just a little over a minute. You cannot concentrate on 3 kids. So your first job is to rule somebody out when they come out, you know, in 3s on the first step. Yeah. And then hopefully rule somebody else out, you know, and then be able to focus on 1 kid going forward. But that's just my own way of looking at how to deal with the 3s.
Do you think that the Worlds and the All Irelands have got almost too big? That if it was more difficult, if you like, to qualify, then you could have smaller numbers, and therefore have over a longer period of time that you could properly judge all children on the stage 2 at a time.
Yeah. If anybody, yeah, well, I do. I understand why it's so large. It's good for the growth of our art. And I keep saying both because
I see it as art.
I do too. But I think it's good for the growth of Irish dancing. I think Irish dancing has never been given the credit that it deserves in the dance world, never mind any other world. Yeah. In the dance world, Irish dancing is not even a thought. I would say to the general public, and thanks to the river dance and the explosion of the shows, that the general public is much more aware of Irish dancing than the dance world. The dance world doesn't consider us really anything. So for the growth of this of what we do, the big numbers really does encourage people, because it is one of those things that there's not, like the Olympics are on this week. There's 3 representing a whole country. So we have much more opportunity. It should be a selling point. Is it? I'm not really sure, to be honest.
I'm not sure either, because I think when you have, it's kind of, what's the phrase? It's having a greater number at the expense of having a smaller number, but all children that all know that they have a reasonable chance of making a podium place.
Mm-hmm.
There's, you don't want it's great to actually say that you've qualified for the world or for the All Ireland or whatever, and that you've competed at it. But I think people are more conscious now financially, and especially coming out of COVID, I think people are going to be watching their finances.
Honestly, I think completely the opposite. I think this year's Worlds, everyone who owns a pair of shoes will be at this year's Worlds, because they have missed so much. Those that have kind of stuck with it anyway. And it's not, the being able to say that you qualified. People use that as a marketing tool.
Yeah,
I think that's more a teacher thing, and to grow their businesses. We don't, but it's part of running a business, which is part of why I've changed how we're operating here. I mean, it's just not something I know how to do. If anybody remembers Greenborough, when they had the heats and the next day there was the finals, I remember walking into the hall and the very first day of the finals, sitting down to watch it. And you're accustomed to opening your book and looking through and going, well, so-and-so's there, and 10, 20 down the road, there's another kid. That first competition was, oh my God, it just blew me away, because they just kept coming and coming and coming. Like every group of kids had, and then you thought, oh, wait a minute, that's because there was the heats the day before. So, I mean, I honestly thought it was absolutely fabulous. Again, the amount of time it takes to run something like that, but to actually get to sit in the hall and watch the finals, it was really exciting. Like, it was probably one of the most exciting things I got to sit and watch at a Worlds the whole way through. You couldn't get up. I had to go to the bathroom and say, oh, wait a minute, I can't. Every time you went to get up, somebody else was on the stage. So, I mean, I thought it was absolutely brilliant. Personally.
I miss it so much. I mean, just to be able to go to a fest and sit down and watch it, or to know that you can go in. We can't get into anything at the moment. This is my second year without being able to run my own fest. Mm-hmm. But I have to be honest, I think there can be a lot more, and I don't know if you agree with me or not, a lot more done to promote Irish dancing beyond what has been done. You spoke there a few minutes ago about within the dancing world not really respecting the Irish dancing, or not knowing anything beyond the what they see, because they're not seeing it on TV. They're not seeing it. I think that there should be posters. There should be outside people marketing, branding it, marketing it, advertising it on TV. Such a competition is coming up. The World Championships is coming on. The All Ireland is coming on. The North Americans, or whatever, and have posters all over the place for people to just walk in off the street and say, look, I'm here on the holidays. I'd like to go and spend the day watching an Irish dancing competition. They may never have heard of Irish dancing, but they're into dance. And it might bring people in who then may bring their children into Irish dancing, who would never have been introduced to it had they not seen a poster up in the newspaper or.
Yeah. Well, that's how I got into it. You know, I mean, my parents didn't know anything about Irish dancing schools. They just happened to be at a dance and children were dancing. I think a good first step would be to join the dance world. If the pandemic has taught us nothing, there is power in numbers.
Yeah.
And I don't know what the situation in Ireland was like, but I do know sport, whether it was indoor or not, i.e. gymnastics, etc., all got to go back way before our kids did. We were just considered like a gym.
Yeah, they don't know.
And we didn't have the numbers or the association behind us to lobby or fight, for the rights of our children. So I think a good first step would be to become part of the dance world. Now, you can correct me if you're wrong. I've always understood that Irish dancing is not actually recognized in Ireland as a dance form, like officially.
It's not recognized. I think what it should be recognized in this country or in any country is as a cultural art form.
Mm-hmm.
If it's recognized as a cultural art form, then it's treated as a cultural art form. It's not. It doesn't seem to be considered sport, because if it was, it would be like the GAA,
Mm-hmm.
who are allowed to their football players and their hurlers are allowed back, and they're all playing, and all their camogie players are all back. It's not considered it doesn't seem to fit into any category. I just have a problem. I have always seen it as a cultural art form, and it should have been pushed by, as I see it, by the likes of the Irish Tourism Board.
Well, the only problem with the strictly thinking of it as a cultural art form is the competitive end of it has been pushed so far, and is at such a high standard that strictly considering it a cultural art form would not give us the venues and the promotion that we actually need. I mean, I actually think we should be part of the dance world. No different than ballet is French originally, isn't it? But it's recognized in Ireland as a dance form. I don't believe that Irish dancing is actually recognized as a dance form, and I think that's a problem.
No, the dancing isn't back either. There's nobody allowed back in this country. I mean, it's only on Monday this week that you were allowed to go into a pub, but you had to show. Now, a lot of the pubs have refused to open. They've said that they won't be part of a medical apartheid, and that they will not open up until everybody is allowed back with the freedom of their own bodies. But nothing is back. We're just there's teachers all over the country who are losing their. I mean, it's their life.
Well, it happened to us. Yeah, I mean the pandemic actually, was devastating for us because we are not as large as other people, and we really were a school, geared to majors. So for us to survive without any of it, it wasn't even just not having competitions. It was having our school would survive financially on extra lessons for a major, or the All Ireland or the Worlds was coming up. We didn't have any of that to train for. The school being small, financially, just a weekly class was not enough to actually even keep the school going. So the pandemic was actually really devastating for us. I can speak for financially to Canada, but we were really devastated by the financial hit. And I know teachers all over are struggling.
It's terrible. And what I think is really hard is that of all the dance forms, it's the one dance form that can be that's socially distanced, because each child has to be at least 3 feet away from each other.
Yeah, and arms down. No use of arms. I know. It's very ironic.
it probably is the most socially distanced art form. I mean, schools could go back and not teach teams, or could teach teams without using the hand movements for the time being. But there doesn't seem to be any goodwill towards it, towards allowing the dancing back, at least year back. And we see the you're like a child in a sweet shop looking at all of you back at competitions.
Oh, we're not back. We haven't had a competition here since the beginning of the pandemic. I do know what you're saying. Watching our American counterparts, I called it COVID envy. I was like, oh my gosh, and their kids were able to compete. It was really hard on the kids here that weren't able to compete, because they were watching their friends that they normally compete against in the States. So, I mean, they've just had their North American nationals. They've just had, they've had all these things, and we've had nothing. So it really is, you don't want to sound like you're wishing that they didn't have anything, because that's not fair. More power to them. I'm really glad they sorted a way to run it safely. But for our children, here in Canada, who could not compete in anything, it's been devastating. And the longer that they can't compete in anything, the more they feel that they have to catch up, that they're behind and they'll never catch up. So there's kind of always this, there
is that, Rose, and it's the same here.
The kids that did compete at the U.S. Nationals, heart goes out to all those teachers. More power to them. Big congratulations. Some of those children have been at class all year. Some of them have only been back since January. The Californian kids, I believe it was April that they were allowed to go back to class. So it was a completely uneven field that they're not used to. But if you actually did watch any of it, the smiles and joy and all those kids' faces said it all. So, our kids again are sitting, watching.
Here in Ireland,
so as the Irish kids would be, a lot of kids are in that position. So,
and and you're saying this is the country that it actually originated in, here in Ireland, and the children will be so far behind
I'm not saying they would be. They feel they will be. They themselves feel like they are.
They will, and fitness level. They have to be at a deficit because they haven't been able to keep fit. And the motivation,
absolutely.
To keep fit when you're at home and you're on your own, and maybe you're an only child, or maybe you have a brother or a sister, but they don't compete, and you're there and you're thinking, will I ever get back to dancing? And you're not motivated to. I mean, for me personally, as an only child, I loved going to dancing class because you were meeting other children, and that's part of it. The social aspect, and the Zoom will only go so far, Rose. I mean, you can teach children inside forever on Zoom, but if you're a child that's already an only child, or you don't have brothers and sisters who compete, they might be doing other things. You're kind of part of the experience, and you need the physicality of other children with you to actually motivate you to practice.
I apologize, Mary. There's a scan thing coming up on my computer. Oh, of course it did. I don't know if I'm back. There was a big scan thing that jumped up in the middle of my computer.
I could still see you.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I do agree with that. It was very, kids that had a brother or sister or someone at home, kids that are home by themselves, I think generally during the pandemic have really suffered.
Yeah.
I mean, no school, no activities.
Okay.
Yeah, we've had a lot of discussion with different kids. Their mental well-being is not in a great place right now. So hopefully, the Irish dancing teachers of this world can be of help when they actually do get back to more normal. But it is really for children that are by themselves, or don't have brothers and sisters. I mean, literally have been on their own for months and months and months and years now, going on years. I mean, it's got to be mentally devastating for kids. I mean, part of being a child is developing socially. You
And
know,
that
part
is
of
what,
being in a dancing class is
yeah,
developing socially. I think the pandemic made a lot of kids realize that it wasn't just the dancing and the competing that had them in Irish dancing, but it was their group of friends in Irish dancing, and they've had none of that. So for some kids, it was just too much, and they've just quit. You know, so hopefully we can
but
rebound.
you're immersed in, I suppose, your family is involved in all aspects now of Irish culture. I mean, your partner, Pat. I mean, tell me, is it always is he always that funny?
I'm glad you think it's funny. Yes, he is always like that from the time he wakes up till the time he goes to bed. So it's like, yeah, he's been a big part of Irish dancing, loves it. He's one of those musicians that loves the kids more and the Irish dancing part more than the music part.
Really?
It's not that he doesn't love music, he does.
He does, yeah.
But he wouldn't be out at never has been, wouldn't be out at sessions playing and all that kind of thing. He strictly plays Irish dancing for the kids. And I'm telling you, he adores them. He adores those kids probably more than he, does would his own. I mean, he just adores the Irish dancing and the Irish dancing kids and the people in it. So yeah, we have pretty much been centered around that. So when it came to deciding what to do when the pandemic was over, I mean, it was gut wrenching. Because it's been our whole life. There's no point, sugarcoating it and saying it's been a big part. It literally has been our whole life.
Absolutely. And the same.
So to come up with new ways of being able to do it and still be involved with it is really what this was all about. And I'm really relieved. I'm really excited.
You're making a big change in your life.
We are making a big change. A lot of things happened here. We lost studios, etc. during the pandemic. I did ask Michaela, are you ready to step in now? And she did. She stepped up to the plate. Michaela Hines. Yeah. She has stepped up to the plate. It gives me a little bit of freedom. I'm still teaching. But I don't have the financial responsibility of running a school. That love of just going in and teaching kids, I'm able to do. Coming off the back of this pandemic, there is a lot of rebuilding that has to happen. And I know a lot of teachers are facing it. And I'm blessed that I was able to hand the school over to a young one. They're much more, media, social media, business orientated, know how to do it. We'll put it that way. Marketing, gung-ho, as we all were when we first started. We have a remarkable staff of teachers who always helped out. So Kathy Irvine, they're all still helping out. Joanne Cunningham, Alison Reaney. I mean, everybody is still helping out. But it has just been like a weight lifted off my shoulder because I knew coming off the pandemic, there would have to be a lot of rebuilding. And honestly, I just wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
But I can still now go in and just teach just purely for the love of teaching. And I'm really excited about it. So I wish both schools, Kate O'Connor has been absolutely a rock down there in Southern Cal. Running the whole thing by herself. I have been of no use when it comes to anything regarding the San Francisco school, which was run by Vinny, and the Southern Cal school, which was run by Kate O'Connor. I have been of no use, no help in running the school. My love was just for teaching and choreographing, and really that's all I know how to do. And to be a successful teacher, you absolutely have to have a little bit more than that, actually a lot more than that. And I think a lot of people don't actually understand that when they see multi-schools and everyone has a different role, and if you're good at what it is you bring to the table, I think you're going to be, fairly successful.
Yeah,
Everyone doesn't.
And Rose, to stick with what you do. But you see some teachers and they're really good at choreography and with putting steps together and with teaching. Others are really good at the financial side of things. And if you get, and with me, I loved the drilling. I'd be a driller. I'd be somebody.
Yeah, I hate drilling. You've just hit the nail on the head. It's one of those things that I absolutely detest.
And I love.
And it's necessary, and it's what makes a good dancer a good competitive dancer.
I don't like making.
I hate it because I can't get by something I don't like. So, the joke, anytime I was in the class is, would you please let them dance a whole step? Because I just can't get by it. So it's absolutely necessary. This is what I was trying to say. And it's, the drilling is really hard because it's something you have to motivate kids to do.
Yeah.
To me, it's one of the hardest jobs. Teaching a new step, to me, that's not hard because kids are usually excited to learn something new. They're not excited to go over the basics over and over and over and over again. They're not excited to do that. So it takes a different kind of person that can motivate kids to, come in and actually really put their heart and soul into doing the drills. So that, you just can prove my theory. People are good at different things. And
Tony Tyrrell told me, Lord rest him, one time, he said, what he used to do was he'd get them to do the lead around and 2 steps and the lead around. And if they started to tire in the second step, he'd make them start again.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
and
the third time he'd keep doing it until they could actually get through the holes, the lead around, the 2 steps and the step, the lead around again without tiring. Then he'd say, now you can sit down. And that's the type of thing. Maybe it's the sadist in me. I just try.
I mean, it's how we used to. I have to say, we still kind of do stamina that way. It's how we used to train the physical part of it. In our day, we didn't run around to gyms and do fitness training. You walked into a class, you took your boots off, you put your shoes on.
You didn't warm up?
Yeah. No. Well, I don't remember. We didn't. Gradually as I was teaching, the kids started to do, and it's evolved from there. Which is also another big part of it. I personally can't touch my toes. I mean, I can do a front kick, but I can't touch my toes. I mean, I've just never been flexible. It's just never been a part of what I've done, So many things are different. And the young teachers have their hands full trying to juggle the physical training, the artistic part, the running a business, it is not an awful lot. So I truly wish the O'Connor Kennedy and the Michaela Hines Academy best of luck with rebuilding.
It was Butler Fearon O'Connor.
Right.
Now what will it be called?
Well, Vinny has retired completely from teaching in San Francisco. Kate is teaching. Her son Sean Kennedy is back teaching with her. I mean, he was teaching originally and then went off to get his career going. And so he is now back with her. So it's a mother and a son. This side of the border, it's the Michaela Hines Academy.
Yeah.
And I will be teaching with them. I'm not having to go into class 7 days a week like I used to. So for me, I asked Michaela if she would take this on. Having this alternate role is absolutely like a breath of fresh air. I can go in and teach because I want to, not because I have to. If I can't teach Monday, I can call and say, okay, I'm going to come in Tuesday. It just gives me that little bit of freedom. Pat and I have moved to the country since the beginning of the pandemic. We're no longer in Toronto. We're a good bit out in the country, which is why I sound like this. I'm allergic to all these trees. I've been living in the city for 35 years. So we've had a lot of changes. I have a granddaughter, so I'm just thrilled. So I will be, obviously still going in and out and teaching. But that's one skill. So it's Michaela Hines Academy in Canada, and it is the O'Connor Kennedy Academy in California.
I'm going to ask a stupid question, but is your granddaughter going to dance?
What
do you do if she says no?
Not sure. See, I guess the pandemic has changed that too. Had there not been a pandemic, she probably would have been toddling along to Feshes with us all along.
Yeah.
You know, she's had no exposure to it. Like, she would have no idea what Irish dancing is.
Funny, isn't
it? Not an idea, not a clue. She's never seen it. She's never heard of it. There would be nowhere, you know, because she just turned 3. Actually, her birthday was yesterday. So she was 3. So like 2, she was 1 at the beginning of the pandemic. She was, you know, an infant. So she's never been to anything. That absolutely changes her perception of it because she's never seen it. Whereas you would think, being the granddaughter of, you know, Rose Fearon and Pat King, that she would be already in the studio. We haven't been in the studio. So she's had no exposure to Irish dancing. They live in a different town. So I don't know. We'll see if she wants to. I wouldn't be pushing her into it.
No?
Well, I wouldn't be because I have a different role in it.
Yeah.
Currently. She probably would have come to class, like I babysit her twice a week. She probably would have been coming to class with me had there not been a pandemic, you know? So, I mean, things are just very different. She's 3 now. So will we start her in it? Absolutely. And see if she likes it. But it's probably a very different view than she might have had there not been a pandemic, because she absolutely would have been toddling along to Feshes with us and, you know, would have been doing that already for a couple of years.
So what's your biggest hope for the future of Irish dancing?
For the future of Irish dancing?
Globally,
that we continue to infuse it with people that love it. I you know, it's one of the few art forms that has no boundaries. Anything else that you're involved in, you have to be something. You have to, you know, you're watching the Olympics. You have to be tall to be a swimmer. You have to be this to be, you know, it's ballet. You have to be a certain body build. Yeah, Irish dancing, you can be anything. You can be tall, you can be thin, you can be short, you can be stockier. It's just limitless bounds. I don't think we nearly promote that enough.
we don't.
You know, Kathy Irvine was one of my first world champions. You know, Kathy Irvine is 4'8". You know, she's just tiny. She wouldn't have been able to do anything else. Her sister is even smaller. I know you're tiny too. I'm only 5 foot. But you didn't have to be. I was an athlete at school, and I'm small, and I would never have got anywhere in athletics because I'm small. So it's one thing I love about it. You don't have to have a body build. All you have to have is a love for it. There was a time where, when I was young, you know, you had this natural talent. I don't believe in that in any way, shape, or form. I honestly believe that anything can be taught if you're taught, as we started the conversation, the basics correctly. You know, the where to put your feet, how to put your feet. Some of my best dancers, I wouldn't even nearly consider them my favorite dancers. But by God, they worked on it, and, you know, and they drilled it, and they wouldn't have been the ones that I would say are the naturally talented dancers. Yes, there is such a thing, but that can absolutely be overcome by 2 things. 1, work ethic and listening to your teachers, and 2, actually loving it.
There's a saying that goes, hard work beats talent when talent doesn't work hard.
Absolutely. You know, so I think, you know, for a teacher to make kids actually love it. I know there's a lot of criticism about teachers who maybe push kids a little too hard. I'm half minds, so I probably would fall into that category. I think it's because when I was a child competing at the Worlds, the idea of being from this side of the water and actually winning at the World, it was kind of not drilled into us, but it was in our psyche that, you know, we're just not going to win over there. We're just, to be honest, the actual truth was we just weren't good enough at the time.
Yeah.
But it was in our psyche that that was just not something, unless you were a boy, you know, if you were a girl. I've never forgotten it. I've never forgiven myself for, you know, giving up. Well, I quit at 17, started teaching for that reason, for doing that. And I've never let my kids ever feel that way. There is nothing that they cannot do. And some, as I say, some of the kids that have been the most successful have not been the most talented.
Yeah.
Had huge issues to overcome. So I think, you know, never write off a kid. Well, we've been a very strange school that we've, you know, had, you know, 1 or 2 or 3 kids in an age group that all do well. And I think that's been a big part of our success, that we don't take a child in an age group and make them the center of the competitive world, because it's just never worked out that way for us. You know, it never.
You know, it's the one, I suppose, you know, when you think about it and you think back on your time, it's probably the one thing that when I see a child inside in the class and you see that they have everything, they even have the parents that want them to be involved and want them to be good. You see the child has talent, they have the courage, they have the feet, they have everything except 1, the interest, or 2, the determination to practice. And I think back and I think, oh, you know, it's so hard. And then you see a child who doesn't have an eighth of what talent, but works really, really hard. And I think back to my own childhood and people saying, oh, she's so natural and things like that. And you listen to that and you think, oh, I don't need to practice because I'm natural. And you regret it so much in later life. It's the one thing you regret, that you didn't put in the hard work that it takes, because it almost takes a village to make a champion as well. Because the child has to be interested, the parent has to be interested, they have to be willing to put the money in, you have to have the costume, you have to have the look, you have to have the determination to practice, and you have to go to the competitions. And that's the sad reality of it, you know.
That would be to be, you know, if you're trying to be a world-class dancer.
Yeah.
And I think those lines get really, really blurred in Irish dancing. You know, there seems to be only the 2 schools of thought. You're either in it to be that level, or like other organizations or you're in it to be nowhere near that level. There doesn't seem to be a middle ground. And I think this is, you know, probably a problem with the way Irish dancing is presented worldwide, that there is no middle ground. You know, people feel that they have to do this. They don't have to do anything. So if you're forcing someone, whether it's a parent or a child, to do something, it's never going to work out.
No.
Like in the long run, it's never going to work out. I just think we're making major mistakes, the way we promote Irish dancing worldwide. I know we are one of the few dance forms that will put kids that have been dancing, you know, maybe 2 weeks, out at a display at St. Patrick's. And we're like, damn, they've learned to reel, a jig, a treble jig, a hornpipe, you know, all the little dances. We have done that. We promote it. So when parents come to the school and you're trying to teach them the basics and say, okay, we won't go to the next step until we can turn our feet out and get this in time. The parents are upset. I mean, how many teachers have had parents walk in the door day 1? When, you know, when do we get our hurt shoes?
I want them to learn the hornpipe. Jimmy Smith told me a very funny story. He said, you know, Jimmy Smith and Kerry, and when he came on, he said to me, Mary, he said, a child came into my class one day, and at the end of the class, she said, how much? for the class. Now, he said I was bringing her around by the hand and no music and teaching her. And she said, it's €7, Jimmy said to her. And she gave him 3.50. And Jimmy was looking at the 3.50 in his hand, and she said, my mommy said, when I can do it to music, you get the €7.
Oh, there you go.
Next time.
There you go. But we're promoting it, that, you know, you can just put on a pair of shoes, walk into a class and learn it. It's only my own personal opinion. I think that's a mistake, and a huge one, because I know a lot of beginners and first, I don't know about, you know, anywhere else in the world, but I know they're not giving it enough of a chance to learn it. They're coming in and trying it and then leaving. And the ones that stay end up being, you know, the ones that love it. But I think we are doing that. Like if you were to join ballet, you know, for 5 years, you're going to be doing
flat shoes.
Right, to learn that part of it long before you learn any major choreography or anything. You know that. You know, I just think we're kind of, I know we think it's a good thing, and when you're out in public, everyone's like, oh, look at them, they're 3 years old and they can do, you know, but they're not learning to dance properly. They're just learning steps. So, you know, I guess it depends on how you want to market it.
Jimmy had the greatest answer when she came back the second time with the child. He put the music on and he pulled her around the floor. He said, now she's done it to music, so it's €7. Yeah. So he got his €7, but it's just, you know, it's, you know, your parents, and you are quite right, your parents that will say to children when they come home, what step did you learn today? Not what did you learn, or what did you polish today, or what did you improve on, or what, and it's the biggest lesson you can teach a child is learn a few things. So, you know, you see children learning piano and speech and drama, and they're going to Irish and they're going to French and they're learning the piano and they're doing Irish dancing and horse riding. And you're thinking, how are they going to be good at any one thing? And you just think that parents should just say, look, you're doing these 4 things now, choose one and be good at it and practice and get better and better and better and better and better at. And what you're not good at, practice it until you are good at it, instead of wanting to know what step did you learn today.
Right.
You know?
I honestly think we've done that to ourselves, you know, or, you know, with the explosion. Now, granted, Canada, I don't ever believe had the explosion from Riverdance. We're just a different country. But most certainly it did in America. And I think the idea that kids could walk into a class and learn Riverdance immediately is really the thought process.
Yeah.
You know, and no other dance form faces that. Or, you know, they just don't. So I think maybe if we could redirect it a bit, in the long run would be better for teachers. You know, you started the conversation by talking about traditional sets. It is really hard in a country, in this country anyway, to teach a kid a traditional set and sell the parent on why it's important, because they're not dancing them at a competition.
It's difficult
here. It's really difficult to say you have to master all these before you learn, or, you know, 1 or 2 of them anyway, before you learn a jig or a hornpipe. It's very difficult to sell that concept when they're looking, you know, at competitions with kids that are, you know, under 6 and under 7, up doing a jig and a hornpipe, and, you know, off they go. So it's very difficult to sell that concept of learning the basics first, because we don't actually do that in Irish dancing.
That's what happened to me. I spent so much time drilling. When you're in the one teacher class and you spend so much time drilling and starting with the easy reel and the light jig and the single jig and the slip jig and the easy hornpipe, and then they go to a competition and they see other children doing advanced, and they're not looking at the way they're done, they're just looking at the fact that
Agreed.
they off with them and they go to another school, and you think after putting all the work into them at their basics, they go to a school because they think, oh, Mary doesn't teach the advanced, she just teaches, but you're there trying to drill this. So you're forever at basic level, because the minute they get out of basics, they go to another school.
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the perception that the advanced or the tricks are just that, and actually all they are is an extension of the basics.
That's it.
And different ways of adding different sounds to them, or moving differently. But I think for it to remain Irish dancing, the influence of all the different dancing and all around the world has been brilliant, as long as you keep it within the confines of some Irish dancing move and modify it. Then, it's actually quite fun. But again, it's hard to sell that concept that, this is really important when, as you say, they're, looking at kids that are 6 and 7 and already in championships, Like when I danced in Canada, when I danced, the first age group for championships was under 16. In my country. Yeah. Under 13 came in the, I would say 70s, early 70s. There was an under 13. So it was under 13, under 16 and over.
Yeah, we had
when I quit in 1977, that was the first year that the senior ladies wasn't over 17.
Yeah.
1977. So there's been a lot of changes, So people are expecting kids to come into class and within the space of a year, be in championships and off and running. And I think that is actually the pressure right now. I'm not sure about Ireland, but I know definitely the grades are really suffering here. People almost find it insulting that they're in the grades, or that, they can't get out of the grades. And it is an issue. And I guess I think it's, I think we've done it, to be honest.
I think Rose, they're finishing almost too early. Competition, because children then leave and they have nothing. They might have college or that, but they have no level of fitness after they give up. It was 1981, I was thinking there, when I gave up. I went into Bunratty Castle at the time, but 81 and 83, then I think it was, I did the DCRG. But I went on, that was when I gave up. Competition was going into Bunratty. But I just think that 17, 18 is very young to be giving up a level of fitness that they've only known all their lives since the age of 3, 4, and then
well, I don't know about that, because the senior ladies, is one of the biggest competitions now. So the middle is really difficult when kids first go to college, and rightfully so. And in this country, kids travel quite a bit to go to school, like not like in America. Like they literally cross the country to go to school. So it completely changes their dynamics. For some kids, it's impossible to keep up Irish dancing. It's just physically not possible, depending on where they go to school. Canada is not quite as spread out. It is size-wise, but you wouldn't get a lot of children traveling from, let's say, Vancouver to Ontario to go to school. Like they kind of stay a little bit more, at least within province. But our school system is different. The focus most certainly in Canada is on school. It always has been. Even when I was teaching, focus was on school. I've once, twice, 3 times run into children that wanted to take a year off to train. To me, it's never worked out for any child that's done that. The kids are so used to doing both. To take a year off to strictly completely changes their mentality. It's never really worked. So for us, for seniors, I don't know, the senior ladies is massive. The last time I judged it, it was in London, I think I judged. Yeah. And there was over 200 in it. It was massive. So the interest is still there. We didn't have that opportunity when I was dancing, but I'm old. So we didn't have that opportunity.
We're around the same age.
Yeah.
You and I, and it wasn't there, and I suppose it was. I think if you had the likes of the Riverdance came in 1995, and yeah, it was just, if that is something like that, if children and dancers knew that they had shows to go into once they finished competition, it might have actually encouraged, people to stay longer. Because I mean, friends of mine gave up when they were 12, 13.
Oh, sure. Yeah.
And if they'd known that they could have probably got into a show, they would have stayed on.
Oh my God, I would have been, if that was available when I was dancing, I'd be like, oh my God, I would have been off like a shot. I do think we lost a generation of teachers. I mean, as good as Riverdance has been for Irish dancing, we really did lose a whole generation of teachers. I know when I was in my 50s thinking, well, really by this state, there should have been a whole young crew coming up and taking over. But there was like that gap. So, yeah. I mean, they're all back into it now, which is brilliant to see. But there was like that little hole there where there wasn't the new teachers, starting up or coming into it. So I think we've recovered from that now, but I mean, it's taken 10 years to recover from that. So.
Well, Rose, you've been absolutely fantastic today. And for a woman who said shy or you're quiet coming on,
yeah.
I said.
Thank you for having me. I know I'm kind of hard to pin down. I think it's just mostly because I'm a little shy when it comes to doing things like this. But I can always talk about something I love. So
it's just a chat. And I suppose we're speaking about something we both love.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose when you feel confident enough to talk about the subject that you're going to be talking about, it's never a chore. And it was an absolute pleasure. It was an honor actually to have you on.
Thank you.
You're someone I've wanted on for a long time. Finally wore you
to pin me down. Yeah. Anyway, thank you so much for having me. I appreciate it.
Say hello to Pat King for me.
I absolutely will. Okay.
Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.